Hey guys, Michael the DC Multiverse collector here, taking a look at the DC Multiverse gold label Waverider. Now my understanding is that this is a Target exclusive in the United States. It's not a character that I knew much about before it was announced as a figure, but I've gone and had a look and he has an absolutely perplexing and fascinating backstory, so I'm really excited to see what this figure's like out of the box. Big thank you to McFarlane Toys and Head Start Toys for sending this figure for review. So here on the front you'll see Waverider in all his golden glory, looking great. You can see we've got a spread of accessories which I'm excited to get in there and have a look at. On the side you'll see it's Waverider, DC Classic is the designation, and again this is the designation that McFarlane tends to use when he's not pulling from any particular source material and when a figure's design is sort of an amalgam of existing sources. That's the way I interpret it, but let me know what you think. On the back we have some incredible art of Waverider, and you can see that at first blush there's more than a passing resemblance between the figure and the art, which is nice, although there are a few notable stylistic differences. So yeah, that's Waverider, and I can't wait to get him out of the box and see what we get. Okay, having opened him up, here's everything you get with Waverider out of the box. Now I've also removed his default hands that he comes with in the box, so you can see the array of hands that he comes with. So let's get the boring stuff out of the way. First, we have the classic Multiverse display stand, which I'm bored of talking about and you're bored of hearing about. Let's get it out of here. Now, we have the trading card. Now, normally I'd skip over the trading card and I'd say, well, yes, here's the art and here is the bio if you want to pause and have a look. But this is actually really interesting because this gave me some extra background about the character and clued me into the fact that this is actually the Booster Gold Waverider and not the original Waverider, who is Matthew Rider. Who dies and is resurrected and dies again, and then ultimately Waverider, that identity is assumed by Booster Gold. You can pause that and have a read. It sounds like an absolute mess of a story, but also interesting, and I want to learn more. And it leads me to think, I wonder why we didn't get the classic Matthew Rider Waverider. You know, maybe that's to come in the future, but an interesting decision to give us the Booster Gold version of this character, but it is what it is. So next we have the hands. Now I quite like this selection. You'll see we come with a pair of fist hands, which are very basic fist hands, and more interestingly, we come with a set of gesture hands. I'm really loving the McFarlane trend of 2023 is to give us gesture hands. Instead of just a grippy hand and a fisty hand, we've got gestures. I'm really glad this figure doesn't come with a grippy hand. It wouldn't make any sense. Good job, McFarlane. Give us something more interesting, more dynamic, with a splayed hand and a pointing hand. I think these are the same ones we might have got with the Riddler, the classic Riddler, but doesn't matter, they seem to fit the character quite well and will make for some dynamic poses. And then, most interestingly of all, we have these effects. Now originally I thought these were just flash effects that have been reused, but no, looking closer, these appear to be brand new sculpted effects in translucent orange with a bit of blue wash over the top. These, as far as I can tell, are meant to sort of be, I don't know, time distortion effects or sort of cosmic rays or something, and they're meant to go on his arms and legs. I'll show you how those work later. Anyway, let's have a look at the figure and I'll give you my first impressions. Okay, so here is Waverider. You'll see that I've attached 3 out of his 4 effects. I didn't attach them all because it just didn't seem to make sense in the circumstances, but here he is. And first impressions is that he's surprisingly cool. So I knew going in that this was essentially generally a reuse of the Batrocitus body buck. If you don't know, Batrocitus is a Batman Atrocitus hybrid from the Death Metal storyline. It's not a figure that I picked up. I just don't have much interest in the Death Metal stuff. It may be a little bit too out there, that's just personal preference. But I did know that this was a reuse of this buck, so it didn't bother me. I don't have any other versions of this buck on my shelf. But now that I look at him, it seems to fit quite well. It's perhaps a little bit of a stockier buck than I'd think for Wave Waverider, but I think it's generally pretty clever. It's got that sort of textured look, which, depending on your preference, may or may not be suitable for a character like this, but I think it gives it some visual distinction as opposed to just sort of a black slab of plastic. First thoughts are this is a really attractive looking figure overall. And yeah, I mean, these effects pieces, when they're on, I mean, they sit on pretty awkwardly. They do give some dynamism to some poses, but it's not something that I imagine I'll be using all that much. They sort of limit the poses you can do, and they sort of only, loosely grip on, they sort of just, I don't know. These effects just don't do much for me, but I reckon clever posers will have a lot of fun with them. So yeah, there's Waverider. I really dig that hair. I think it's about time we got in and had a look at the aesthetics. Now, head sculpt, I think, is generally pretty well done, quite attractive. It's kind of got a stoic look, which is, I've been complaining about that recently, but for sort of like a character like this, I think it's pretty good. An alternate head, I mean, would have been tricky given all the sort of extra sculpting involved in the hair, but something with a more like I'm running really fast face or traveling through time face would have been cool, like gritted teeth. But, I think this actually works pretty decently. I can't criticize McFarlane too much. Obviously, the hair is the star of the show for this head sculpt. It's a translucent orange. It looks really, really nice. I think the sculpt is generally really, really good. Would have been nice for some color depth. It's all just a sort of a solid orange, but I think it looks really good on the whole. So solid head sculpt. The torso also looks good. I like this line work up here. In terms of reuse from Batrocitus, from everything I can see, having looked up reference material and my own general knowledge, is that he's exactly the same all around except for a different head sculpt, new hands, and this upper body piece here, this upper diaphragm chest piece is heavily modified. So Batrocitus had a lantern symbol there, and he had big pauldrons covering all this up. So it's a completely different look on the upper torso. The lower torso is exactly the same, the diaper, the legs, the boots. So this is actually a fairly intelligent reuse, I think, overall. Obviously, when you compare him to the trading card, which I will do now, you will see some sort of differences there, especially in the chest and the shape of the lower torso. The paneling is just a little bit different, but you can see why when you look at the reference material, why they went for that Batrocitus buck, because the outfit design is really, really similar. So I do like the definition in the abs, how that works into that. I think that looks really nice. All this is raised. I really like how it's raised and not just painted on. Always prefer that. You will see that when you sort of articulate him around, there's a lot of gappiness here at the arms. That sort of, this piece here, this at the butterfly joint, doesn't really work when you bend the arm back. So that's a bit of an eyesore in my opinion. And also, when you break it up, this gold just doesn't flow. So you can see on one side, if you keep the arm like that, the gold sort of flows naturally. Yeah, but as soon as you sort of tilt it up like that, you get this big gold chunk, which looks awkward. I don't know if they could have done half gold, half black. That should be painted black, ideally. I think that would look better, but that might just be asking for a bit much, a bit nitpicky. But yeah, that's the only sort of visual blemish on this guy. Yeah, generally the boots look good. They've just taken the Batrocitus boots and cast them in this sort of pearlescent gold. It's not like a pure gold though. It's kind of peachy. It's kind of got a nice shade to it. And just in terms of his overall proportions, I think this is it's actually quite a nice buck. It's maybe a little bit stocky, like I said, maybe not as lithe as you would like, but it's a good buck. I can't really complain. I think it looks better here than it did on Batrocitus, so that's something. Turning now to articulation, and we'll go through this quickly. For many of you, this will be very familiar from Batrocitus, so I won't belabor the point. Head tilt, you can look down that much, can look up that much. You won't get much because of the way the hairpiece hits the back of the neck, but it's decent. You can see he can tilt quite a lot, obviously spin 360 degrees, solid stuff there. And I think the head sits quite nicely on the neck as well. Doesn't look like a lollipop. Yeah, quite nice. You'll see the arms, you get better than a T-pose. no problem whatsoever. They obviously rotate, double jointed elbows, but this sort of gauntlet or armor piece inhibits how much you'll get out of that. So that's a bit limiting. You'll see there's a ball and a hinge on the hand, which allows for quite a good degree of expressiveness. Diaphragm cut allows 360-degree rotation of the diaphragm. And is there one at the waist? Oh, yes, there is. So this is like a soft rubber torso. I thought that might inhibit that rotation, but it does not. So that is pretty good. I also like how this hangs down and covers the diaper piece. It actually makes it look much more attractive than normal. Now for the ab crunch, not a lot. And you see when you crunch him forward, you get this sort of unsightly bulge at the back, looks hideous. And he leans that far back. So it's okay. It's not mind-blowing, but it's definitely decent. In terms of legs, kicks out over 90 degrees. Can do the splits. Absolutely no problem there. Beautiful splits. Double jointed knees, but again, the way these are sculpted and this sort of boot here means you're just not going to be able to kick your own butt. But do we really need him to? I ask you. I don't think so. Not much of a swivel in the thigh. No boot swivel as per normal. And at the foot, we have rotation. We have a rocker, toe articulation. Standard for McFarlane. And he's using the sculpted ball joints, which always look better. So yeah, in terms of articulation, rock solid, not the best, but nothing you can really complain about in terms of what you'd want to do with this character. So articulation's good. Now let's do some comparisons with Waverider. First up, here we have Waverider standing alongside, well, himself from an earlier time. It's Booster Gold. This is an interesting comparison. You'll see that Waverider, or Booster Gold, has had a glow up in terms of his musculature, yeah, it's hard to sort of sense that these are the same character based on their different proportions, but it's multiversal timeline stuff, so they can justify it however they want. Yeah, so there you go. Booster Gold and Booster Gold. Next up, here we've got Waverider against his best buddy of all time, Blue Beetle Ted Cord. So Booster Gold and Blue Beetle Ted Cord are BFFs forever. I don't know, Waverider and Blue Beetle Ted Cord don't seem like BFFs. They seem like they're on totally different wavelengths, if you'll pardon the pun. I don't know. Doesn't quite work for me. Next up, we have Waverider standing alongside Brainiac from Injustice 2, and here's Waverider with Parallax. And here he is with his wavemate, Midnighter. If you haven't checked out my review of Midnighter, please do. It's a really interesting figure and a really interesting character. And here is Waverider against Barry Allen from Flashpoint. So what do I think of Waverider? I think he's a good, solid, but not exceptional release from McFarlane. I think this is a sensible reuse of the Batrocitus body buck, but I think making the decision to use that body buck has sort of hemmed McFarlane in to that more modern Booster Gold version of Waverider, when I think most people would have preferred the original classic Matthew Ryder Waverider. In any event, if we look at what we actually do receive, I think it's a pretty good figure. I think the colour really pops, the peachy gold looks great, the head sculpt looks good, we get a nice array of accessories, including those effect pieces, which, while they're not my cup of tea, I think posers will have fun with. I like the extra hands, and overall, I think the textured look of this buck gives this figure some visual interest. Unless you're a completionist, or have a love of the character, or you're just like me and you love filling out your multiverse, this is probably a pass. But for those of you who like the C-list, the D-list characters, I think this fits the bill quite nicely. Here's hoping we get a classic Waverider somewhere in the future. Anyway, if this video has been helpful or interesting, please give me a like, consider subscribing, I'll have more for you soon. So in the meantime, happy collecting, and thanks so much for watching.